integration, and specifically how you can utilize CMIS to make that happen in the content world. So, but first, before I get going, I'll tell you a bit about myself. So, my name is Martin Bergljung, and I'm from Sweden. Work in London for a consultancy called Ixxus. I've been there for 3 years. Before that, I was another 3 years for another Alfresco. To get into Alfresco started when that first company asked me to build an email integration for Alfresco, so I kind of got into it on the deep side in the beginning quite quickly. So try to integrate Apache James IMAP solution into Alfresco. In 2011, I wrote a book. It's starting to get a bit outdated maybe, but still some sections about the repository architecture and stuff that might be a good read. I presented at DevCon 2011 and 2012, which was more of a developer-centric presentation, so it was a lot of coding. This year, I thought I'll go more high level, design architecture instead. But I'm still going to give you some pointers for code I've written that you can download and use at the end. Right, so this is what we're going to do. I'm just going to give you a bit of introduction to enterprise application integration just to set the scene for what I'm talking about. And then a quick one on CMIS if you're not too familiar with it, very quickly. And then I'm going to go through a number of scenarios. Basically, I'm going to present a scenario, some situation you might have. It might be a problem, it might not be a problem. And then some solution ideas to how you can move forward to enable enterprise application integration with CMIS specifically. At the end, I will go more into some specific products like Drupal, Mule, and how to talk to Alfresco in the cloud. So there will be a bit more hands-on there. And at the final bit is I'll just tell you where you can download the code. If you are accessing this presentation, grab the PDF file. The other file hasn't been updated because I've been changing it all the way up to last minute. So let's get going. So if you are thinking about enterprise application integration, you're probably thinking about looking at all your applications and systems in your enterprise, trying to integrate them left and right. And that's, everybody knows that kind of a thing. And then you're thinking, okay, this has already been solved. Why are you talking about this? SOA, service-oriented architecture, has been around for a long time where they've solved this entangled spaghetti scenario to something more strict structure with enterprise service bus, messaging-oriented system, and so on. And I'm completely on board with that. It's already solved. However, if we go into the content management kind of area, maybe you're not having that much reuse and integration as you would like. So I think in a lot of companies, this is how it might be looking. So you have different departments installing different systems to handle different types of content. And this is, I've seen it personally in almost every project. I've been in around 20 Alfresco projects, and it's looking like this everywhere. So you have even different vendors, new, old, black box, big stuff, and you have other applications like web content management that are also managing their own content files and so on, custom applications and so forth. So this is something you want to look at and do something about, and that's what we're going to talk about mostly. First, okay, what's CMIS? How many of you have never heard of CMIS? How many of you have programmed with CMIS? All right, so we'll just step through it quickly. So we have this API. So basically, we have lots of operations for querying the repository, see capabilities, and navigate through it, creating folders and documents, version that stuff, multi-filing, so you could have a document in 2 folders. Policies, these are not actually enforcing anything. If you set a policy, you need to build code around it to enforce it, and so forth. We have some new stuff, create type, update type in 1.1. That's really interesting, which I'm coming back to, because that means you can inject a content model into a running system, which is really useful. We got the query language, so you can use SQL 92, good for end users, don't have to learn something new. Got a model, which is out of the box, so we got different types, document folder, ratio, etc., new types. We can build our custom model on top of this. We got a transport we need to select. Do we want to use XML, JSON? I prefer JSON, so I can feed what's coming back straight into a JavaScript library widget. For example, I could use a jQuery data table or something. Just grab the JSON, tell it where are my stuff, and then feed the widget straight off. I could use an HTML form to submit stuff directly into Alfresco. If you went to CMIS 1.1 yesterday, you saw how that can be done, which is pretty cool. Benefits. There's loads of benefits by using a standard. So you're language neutral. So what does that mean? I've been using different kind of architecture for quite a long time, all the way back to Corba in the 90s. And it's always been about language neutral and stuff. So if you are coding or using a language that can make an HTTP call and that can manage process XML or JSON, you're ready to get going with CMIS. So that's the only thing you need. If you are working in Lisp, Clojure or something, and you can make an HTTP call and process JSON or something, then you can actually talk to a CMS system via CMIS. It's a standard service API, so it's going to be useful for the long run, because I personally would rather learn a standard API than sitting with some proprietary stuff for years and years, which doesn't give me much in the long term in my career and so on. And because the query language is built on SQL, it makes it easy for end users to adopt. So there's lots of benefits. If you are thinking, is this really used? Does anybody use it? This slide should kind of point to that. It's everywhere. It's in Alfresco's products. Share, speak CMIS if you can to the repo. If you're talking to the cloud, it's CMIS. If you're going from mobile to Alfresco, it's CMIS. If you are using Workdesk to talk to Alfresco, it's CMIS. So you better get on top of it. Everybody's using it. Right, so we can use CMIS to enable enterprise application integration when it comes to content. So what we want is to, in the long run, enable a central storage, which is kind of the master of all content. And that makes it easier to search and get to the information. It's not duplicated. We're not kind of creating new duplicated operations in different systems. So let's look at some scenarios. So this is probably a very common scenario. We have a lot of problems, or this is the situation. We have content silos, so we have maybe even duplicate content in different stores here. How are we going to be able to do a consolidated search? How are we going to get, if I want to know all the information, all the content for a particular project, how am I going to do that in an easy way? And so on. So one way is to embrace CMIS and say, okay, we're going to start. We're going to say, we're going to use CMIS. That's our API. And number two, we're going to look at what systems should not store documents and files. So there are enterprise applications that you might not want them to store files and content. So you might take a policy decision, okay, that's going to be stored in proper content management systems. So in the beginning, you cannot just select Alfresco and throw everything else out. So you're going to be stuck with Documentum, SharePoint, and other systems for a while. This is a good start. Then you can keep going and say, okay, we're going to slowly migrate over to using Alfresco as our primary master source of all files, all content. And you can bring in an ESB, Enterprise Service Bus, like Mule, and you can use it to process content. Let's say you have millions of documents in Documentum. You cannot just say, we're going to migrate that on Friday and then be done. That's not going to happen. It takes a long time. So you can say, I'm going to use Mule ESB and their CMIS connectors and HTTP connectors and stuff and talk to Documentum and do kind of phased migration, grab stuff here and inject it into Alfresco. Meanwhile, I'm going to index Documentum via processing metadata and update, for example, Solar or Elasticsearch. We actually do this in a couple of our projects where you cannot just take the whole Documentum store and migrate it in here. You then have one enterprise search portal where you might search, you hit something, it happens to be in Documentum, so there's just a link up taking you to Documentum. If it's over here, it takes you here. So if you know about Solar, when you install Alfresco, you get Solar, it has multiple indexes. Before, when you were using Alfresco, you had just Lucene, one index. With the new 4.0 and on, Apache Solar supports something called cores. And each core is basically an index. So you could have more cores here to index other systems like Documentum, besides the 2 cores for live and archive content that comes with in installation. You can then grab more stuff from the file system. For example, let's say there was some scanned stuff here. You can grab that and inject it also. So you can start to say, we're going to use CMIS, we're going to use the tools around it to create a better architecture. So that's one kind of thinking around what you can do. Now, the next thing is embedded customizations. You're probably thinking, this is what we always do, what's the problem? This is from a customer visit where I was doing some consulting in the financial area. So they had a loader that they built that injected 60, 70,000 documents per day into Alfresco. And sometimes you're going to come into problems there. So they were saying to me, how can we, in the future, make this a bit better? Because now, if we're going to upgrade this loader, if we're going to scale it or do anything, it's going to impact Alfresco. And it was only installed on one node also for some reason. But even if you have multiple node installations, still more problem. So if you want to upgrade that, you're going to make sure it works with the Alfresco version. If you want to update Alfresco, you have to see that it works with the loader, etc. If something goes wrong, you're going to have to troubleshoot and see, is it the loader, is it Alfresco, what's going wrong? So a lot of problems around embedded customization. So here you had scaling, how do you scale, how do you do resilience, fault tolerance, how do you troubleshoot upgrading? Maybe you can start thinking in terms of extract this to its own service instead. And think about service or component that lies outside Alfresco. And adopt, for example, a CMIS client like OpenCMIS if this happens to be Java. So OpenCMIS is the Java library subproject of Apache Chemistry, which gives you access to all the operations in the CMIS API. So now, when you extract it, you can scale that independently. You can even write a multi-threaded system here that will be as fast as this embedded one. You can track down problems with this separately. You can upgrade it separately. You can build it separately. You can upgrade this separately without worrying about this because it's CMIS. So that's another thinking how you can move forward with these kind of things. Going to go more into this. So here, as another customization. So this is a more elaborate one. So here's somebody who built a role-based access control system, which has its own database with things like this group can have access to these operations. There is a client UI, which may be calling some proprietary web script stuff, and so on. So you're going to have loads of problems here when something goes wrong or you want to upgrade and so forth. So this is similar to maybe what you have if you are familiar with the records management. They have fine-grained access control per operation that you can set up. Now, let's use CMIS to make this a better solution. Again, a service. We're going to extract it. We're going to still use the OpenCMIS client to talk to Alfresco here. We're going to bring in another module from the chemistry in OpenCMIS called the OpenCMIS Server Framework. That component can be used to build a CMIS server. So what you can do is you can actually build yourself a CMIS proxy, basically. So you can have a CMIS call come in, let's say create document, and you can intercept it here, do some checks if you are authorized as a user to call that method. If not, send back an exception or something. And then if you are OK, just propagate the call further on. In fact, that OpenCMIS Server Framework is actually used by Alfresco to implement the CMIS runtime. So you can be pretty sure it's tested. All right, so another kind of extension that's very common. For example, when I built that mail integration system, there was a humongous AMP and domain models and loads of libraries from Apache James, obviously that email server. So you get immediately loads of problems there. You have libraries that one product wants to use, but they clash with Alfresco's because you don't have an OSGI solution where you have compartmentalized Spring context and stuff. You're going to have problems. So what we want to do is lift this outside also and see if we can do a better solution. So here, let's adopt CMIS 1.1. Let's create the healthcare app externally and have it talk CMIS. And when it starts up, it will actually inject its domain model. So it will take the healthcare model with patient records and stuff, for example, and inject that into Alfresco, a running Alfresco, which is pretty cool. And then you can update, you can manage that. Later on, let's say you don't want to use that app anymore, then it could extract itself from the system. It could just remove content related to this model, remove the model, and be done with it, at least in theory. So this kind of cool stuff that is enabled by using CMIS. This is a common thing that I see a lot. Somebody builds an app, they use proprietary web scripts and stuff, and then they are stuck there. If you do this, try and adopt the CMIS libraries that are, if you're in a Java environment. Otherwise, you can also adopt because it's platform independent and so on. I can tell you about a project I was involved in. I built a jQuery mobile app. It uses all of this stack here: OpenCMIS client, Alfresco OpenCMIS extension, which brings you stuff to work with Aspect, and the Spring CMIS extension with Surf. So we use Surf to create the app. That gives you another thing in the Spring Surf web scripts controllers. You can use the CMIS root object to work with CMIS calls and stuff. So we built that, and that's then, if you build an app like that, you could run it against a lot of different CMS systems, which is, if it's a commercial app, it makes sense, right? Now, last scenario. Let's say we have something like this. We have different kind of organizations working together here. We have a partner that has created an application that uses some proprietary web script to upload a document or something into Alfresco. We have somebody grabbing a document as an attachment, sending it to a client. So this is a completely proprietary solution. We're also sending documents out, so we kind of not utilizing links or anything. Now, instead, think about the cloud, do a hybrid solution. Tell your partner, you now have to use this new enterprise app here. It's registered with the cloud, so when you want to use the cloud, you basically take your corporate email address, you sign up, you're going to be automatically joined to your company's network in the cloud. So in my case, Ixxus.com. If I'm participating, such as in this Alfresco Summit, I will be in the Alfresco.com network also. I can then start to configure this guy here to sync some stuff up here. This guy loads stuff up here. In Outlook, I go to share, and I do the little share thing via email. So I'm sending a link. Maybe this should actually have been from here. The guy receiving it will just access this document. They will also, this partner and this client will also just possibly have access to stuff that is not dangerous, secure, private stuff that they shouldn't see. So you can see, you can use CMIS here also, so it's all over the place. Now, let's take a look at Drupal. What can you do if you want to start using CMIS there immediately? So basically here, you can see I took the article that comes out of the box, basically, and just added, here is a link to a file, and here is a display of contents of a folder. So how can you do that? You can use two modules, the CMIS API module and CMIS Views module. What they do, in a short explanation, is this module gives you this new type of field, CMIS field. So when you are editing a content type in Drupal, you have this new one you can use. So you can add this Alfresco info, and you're thinking it's going to display a link to a file. And then when you create a new instance of a particular type, like a new article, you're going to be presented by a browser. You can go browse to Alfresco, select a file, there will be a link. So the file will not be in Drupal. Same for CMIS views. This gives you this CMIS folder type, which gives you a browser. So you can browse to a folder in Alfresco and say, please display the contents of that folder in a table in Drupal. You can go on and actually use, let's say you want more specifically to select the content that you're going to display, then you can use CMIS query language, also create a view, a CMIS view. And here I'm displaying a block of some content that matches a query. So basically, I don't know, this probably don't display very well, but here I'm just creating a CMIS view, display everything with Alfresco in the name, and here is the CMIS query. Select star from CMIS document, one of the types, where CMIS name, like Alfresco. And then I say, display this in a table. There I have a new CMIS view, which I can put in a block somewhere. Now, another thing you want to be familiar with is that you can use Mule to also integrate, like I showed you about the scenario where we had Mule and ESB in the system to integrate different content management systems. So here is just a simple example to get you going. In this case, I have a file, kind of input file point here, where I want to grab a file from the file system. I want to convert it to byte array, and then I want to use the Mule CMIS connector to inject that file into Alfresco. So the first thing I need to do then is just configure the file in by an endpoint. So I'm just telling it, you're going to grab Mule, you're going to grab files from this folder here, from this directory. Please look here with a certain frequency. And then we're going to, the middle component there is just going to convert object to byte array, and we're just going to tell it that it's a PDF coming in. And now, the CMIS connector, interesting stuff. You need to tell the CMIS connector what repository you want to connect to. So basically, you say, okay, here is the username and password. The CMIS spec doesn't actually say how authentication should be done. It says something like it should be able to use HTTP basic auth and stuff like that. Now, you need to tell it the repository you want to talk to, so you need to have an ID. And where do you get that? If you call one of these CMIS base URLs here, like CMIS atom pub XML, it's going to send you back a page where you can find the repository ID. Same with JSON CMIS browser binding. So now you basically configure the CMIS connector to be able to talk to your repository. Now you need to tell the connector what operation, CMIS operation, do you want to use. So here I'm saying create document by path, and the file name is going to come from the URL, the incoming HTTP call. I'm telling it place the file and the company home Mule files. It's going to be a PDF. I'm going to create it as a normal CMIS document, so it's going to be CM content in Alfresco. I could have had more specific stuff. It's going to create version 1.0, major version. Here is some XML that is the result of this using the Mule designer, which basically tells you the pipeline of how things work. If you go to where the presentation can be downloaded, there is the project, Mule project, so you can get going. If you want to go the other way around, let's say I want to hit the URL, grab something from Alfresco, store it over there. Then you can create this kind of pipe in Mule. So you have an inbound HTTP here. You then go and grab this document. You fix a file name for it, and you store it somewhere. So you can do this quite easy also in the same kind of way. So you're telling Mule, okay, I want to have an HTTP server kind of going. So it's going to be one way. I'm just going to hit a URL, and it's going to store a file. I don't expect any response. It's going to be on localhost 8081, and it's going to be /getDoc that I'm going to be using to access that. Then after that, I'm at the CMIS connector. So I then need to tell that CMIS connector what operation. So it's getting a content stream, get content bytes for the document. And the object ID, in CMIS, object ID means node reference in Alfresco. That's the same thing. So I'm constructing a node reference here. I'm grabbing a property from the URL. GetDoc is going to have this ID with a node ref. I'm grabbing that here. That's the object ID that I'm going to use when I call get content stream. I'm going to have some groovy code here that sets the file name that's going to be stored with. And then I'm having this outbound file endpoint. So I'm telling Mule, store the file here, and how the name is going to be is determined by the file name property there. So it's pretty cool stuff you can do, and here's some XML, and you can download that and have a look at it. So if you imagine the combination of stuff you can do if you have this at your disposal. Last thing I want to talk about, just to get you going with the cloud. What do you need to do to use CMIS to talk to some site or something in the cloud? You need to set up an account. You need to register your application and then start coding with OpenCMIS, for example. First thing, you go here to that URL there, and you sign up. It needs to be a corporate email address. So you get into your network, which they use the tenant feature in Alfresco, and that's the network, basically. you can then log in, see that you get your stuff, I can access and so on. Then you go to the developer portal, you click on applications, you name it something like My Enterprise App, it's a Java platform, I don't know if there's any other platforms, maybe a description of it. So you're basically telling the cloud, I'm going to have an app here called My Enterprise App that's going to access you. How it's going to access is a bit different than normal authentication. It's going to be a two-phase authentication because there are 3 players. You have the cloud, My Enterprise App, me. My Enterprise App is going to access my content on behalf of me. So basically, I need to ask Alfresco, can you give me an access token? And that's going to kind of spawn off a login dialog. And then I'm going to get back an authorization code, which I can use to get an access token. And then I can start talking CMIS with the Open CMIS library as usual. That's basically what you need to get on top of. So to do that, you need a couple of these keys and secrets and stuff. So you first click on API management, select the development plan, and select the public API. I don't think there's anything else. Then the auth stuff is you need to set up a key here and a secret so you can get the authorization code and so on and access that and exchange that for an access token. So basically, when you generate these, you have these 2 values. You take them and then you download a project that I've supplied, which has a Maven setup. There are 2 Maven projects that is given to you. And one is a plain, simple OpenCMIS Maven project. This one is a Maven project that expects you to be talking to the cloud, so it has all the stuff there. If you're going to use it, the only thing you need to do is open, there's only 2 files. At the beginning of one file, you need to take the stuff from your developer portal, swap it in here, and then you can start using OpenCMIS like you usually do. When you then use it, you're going to see a dialog like this. Do you want to allow My Enterprise App, the one you registered, to access on your behalf with your login? And then you say allow, and that kicks it off. And then you'll get the authorization code, and then you can get an access token, and then you can get going. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, so if you go to the Summit site and a place where you see my presentation stuff, grab the PDF if you want the presentation. There is a Maven project for standard OpenCMIS development, another one for when you want to talk to the cloud, the last stuff, and the Mule project is there also. Right? That's it. Thanks. Any questions?
Does this OpenCMIS client support single-site?
Excuse me. Sorry.
Thank you. Does this OpenCMS client support single sign-on?
Okay, if we talk about, let's not talk about the cloud.
Not cloud, yes.
Just OpenCMS. If you look at the CMIS spec, it says that you will use whatever authentication method is there. So, okay, so if you have, let's say the Active Directory or Windows Domain Server, you configured Kerberos. So for your OpenCMS client to participate in Kerberos single sign-on, you would have to have a Kerberos client thingy that authenticate. I don't even know how that works, but I haven't done it. And I don't know if it works, to be totally honest. But it's not something you can set in OpenCMS. I want to use Kerberos authentication. Maybe, is there somebody from Alfresco who can maybe answer? I don't know, actually. I've only used basic auth, and I think you can also use the Alf ticket thingy. Maybe that's the key, actually.
Yeah, but probably you can't get this Alf ticket through CMIS interface. So you need to call some Alfresco REST service to get it.
What I know is it's not part of the CMIS standard, these kind of things. It lies outside how you do that.
Yeah, you can add the access token as a parameter or as a cookie onto the request. It doesn't help you get the token, which you describe how to do, but if you have it, you can certainly add that to the request coming from OpenCMIS, and they'll work.
So you can supply Kerberos ticket or something with
Oh, no,
that.
I thought you were talking about the OAuth 2 ticket, sorry.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I don't know about Kerberos and what might work there.
I have no definite yes, it works. I don't know. It's separate from the CMIS API, and standard doesn't specify authentication is going to be used. It's outside.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
This HOUS framework that you demonstrated for cloud,
Yeah.
can we use it for standard Alfresco on-premise? Is it possible?
Can the OAuth authentication thing be used with Alfresco on premise? I don't know. No. We have another question here also.
Is there any CMIS implementation for .NET environment?
Yeah, if you go to Apache Chemistry, I believe there is a sub-project similar to OpenCMIS for .NET and for PHP and others, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
You mentioned externalizing an application that's embedded in Alfresco. Could you kind of expand on that? What does that look like? So what would the application be about? That?
Yeah. Okay, let's take an example. In the beginning, I talked about that I was building an integration with Alfresco to enable an IMAP server in Alfresco. So I brought in Apache James, kind of integrated us as an AMP. Today, if I was doing the same thing, I would build an external application based on Apache James and modules in Apache James to actually talk CMIS with Alfresco to inject emails over there. So if you take another example, let's say you're building a mobile app, you then use whatever framework you want to use, and then you use, for example, OpenCMIS or .NET CMIS and so on. I'm not sure I totally understand your question, actually.
The particular slide was the one that had the healthcare app.
Yeah.
So you had that was embedded within Alfresco, and then you mentioned how you could actually externalize the app.
Yeah.
What I'd be interested in is kind of, for that particular healthcare app, what was that implemented in?
It was just an example. So, but let's say, for the case of argument, let's say this was implemented with surf pages. Internally, it was using the Foundation API or something to talk to Alfresco and other Alfresco-specific stuff. You could extract that and use the Spring Surf, for example, and then you could change the Foundation calls to be CMIS calls instead. The model that you bootstrap via XML, you would then skip that and you would bootstrap it via those new CMIS 1.1 calls. Something like that instead.
Okay, thanks.
You also demonstrated one example with different Solar cores,
yeah.
So to improve searching. Is it exposed to the CMIS interface that you can get something like facets, suggestions, or whatever Solar provides by calling these queries, or it's only something like SQL query with result and anything else?
If you are doing a CMIS query, it's going to be implemented according to the standard, so it's going to be calling either Documentum or Alfresco, and then that CMIS runtime is going to use, if it's Alfresco, it's going to use Solar. What I was talking about, and when it's using Solar there, it's just going to use the workspace core. If you have another core, you're going to have to use a custom, you're going to have to build a custom search client. Because each core has a separate URL. So you would have like /documentum core search there. So you would have to do a search in that core and a search in Alfresco's workspace store and then combine those.
I mean a little bit something else. So if I have a client application which uses CMIS to access some services from Alfresco, and I want to display in this client application something like suggestion list, like by enterprise search. CMIS interface, I don't really know CMIS interface, therefore the question, does it provide such, does it support such information about facets?
You mean Solar suggestions, recommendations, things like that?
Yeah, something like that. So it
no.
doesn't, so you need your custom service.
Not that I know of. I don't think it's yet supports those things, no.
Okay, thank you.
Right, I think that's it. Thank you very much for coming to my session. Thanks.